Everyone, thank you for joining. Just a couple of reminders before we get started tonight. There is a sign-in sheet in the back. Certainly sign in if you want to be added to future mailings. We would greatly appreciate your name and address on that. There's also a fact sheet which had been mailed out to the public and a list of acronyms. Previously we've had comments or requests for acronym definitions when we go through these presentations. In terms of the facility tonight, there are restrooms located at the opposite end of the hall, and in the event of an emergency and we need to evacuate, there is a stairwell right outside this door. There's also an emergency stairwell here, and please don't take the elevators.
Good evening again. My name is Ben Evans. I'm a project manager, environmental project manager with the United States Army Corps of Engineers, also known as USACE is the acronym. And I'd like to welcome you tonight to this year's public meeting for the formerly used defense site, Naval Air Station, Grosse Ile. We're excited to be holding the meeting again in person here at Grosse Ile, Michigan, because it was virtual the past few years. The purpose of this meeting is to provide the public with an update on the environmental activities USACE is conducting at Grosse Ile. First, I want to introduce USACE project team members attending tonight. Angela.
Hello, good evening. My name is Angela Schmidt, and I'm the Human Health and Ecological Risk Assessor. I work for the Army Corps of Engineers in Louisville District. And also, I am the technical manager and filling in for Nathan Alexander.
Hi, I'm Nikki Schneider. I'm with the USACE Louisville District Office of Counsel, and I provide legal support for this project.
I'm Bill Harmon. I'm the project manager for the state of Michigan for this project. I've been at it for about 15 years now. So it's great seeing you come out. Thank you.
And I'm Matt Handyside. I'm a project manager with the ATI-CTI joint venture. We are the contractor to the Corps of Engineers.
And then there's also someone attending, or there's also, I'll go through other team members that are not in attendance tonight. That is Mike Maddox. He's the public affairs specialist with USACE. Nat Peters, he's the contracting officer representative, or COR, with USACE. All of these are with USACE, actually, except for the contractor team. So I'll get to that in a second. Jennifer Guffey is the travel liaison. Peter Laurie is the project chemist. And Stephanie Stratton is the project geologist. Now the contractor team will introduce themselves, starting with Matt. Which he's already.
Yeah, just went down the line here, so.
Thank you. I'm Kim Amley. I am a subcontractor to Matt over here. I'm the project manager, and I'm with Jacobs Engineering.
Hi, I have a microphone right here. Yeah, I'm good. Hi, everyone. I'm Megan Ruiz. I'm also with Jacobs, and I am the informational meeting facilitator for this, and also the coordinator. And I'm going to take it back to you, Ben. Come here.
Oh, let's go ahead.
Yeah, you're good right here.
Yeah, I would like to acknowledge our regulatory agency. Bill, he introduced himself just now. He's with the Michigan Department of Environmental, Great Lakes, and Energy, also known as EGLE. And USACE coordinates project activities with EGLE and provides opportunities for review and comment on project documents. I would also like to acknowledge Grosse Ile Township and Grosse Ile Airport as key stakeholders on this project. Excuse me. The project sites are located on property owned by Grosse Ile Township in Wayne County, Michigan.
Thanks, Spencer. This meeting is being audio recorded to produce a transcript, and the transcript will be available to the public at the end of the meeting. I also understand that there is, it's also being video recorded and will be televised. The transcript, when it becomes part of the administrative record, it will be available at the Trenton Veterans Memorial Library. So just over the agenda tonight, we're going to review the history of former Naval Air Station Grosse Ile. We'll talk through the regulatory framework for the formerly used defense sites, or FUDs, and the purpose and objective of this informational meeting. We'll also talk about the status of ongoing environmental response activities at various areas of concern across the former base. We'll also review any community relations activities since the last public meeting, which was in September of 2022. And we do encourage you to ask questions. We ask that you hold those until the end of the meeting, and then we'll go through a question and answer period then. Again, the purpose of this meeting tonight, we're having this meeting, it's in accordance with the Community Relations Plan. The Army does hold an annual meeting to provide an update on the status of the environmental response activities at various areas of concern, and it is an opportunity for the public to ask questions and express their views on those activities. The land that was used to develop the NASG facility was formerly used for farming. In September of 1929, a 340-acre Naval Reserve aviation base was constructed. In 1932, the state of Michigan purchased the airport and leased it to the Naval Reserve Aviation Base. The Navy purchased or appropriated approximately 602 acres previously owned by the state of Michigan and private landowners between 1940 and 1942. In 1942, the Navy changed the facility designation to U.S. Naval Air Station. The Army then acquired 52.53 acres from the Navy and an additional 10.55 acres from the surrounding landowners from 1954 through 1957, and that was used as a Nike missile site until 1963. The property was transferred to the General Services Administration, or GSA, in 1969, with subsequent transfer of 549 acres to Grosse Ile Township through a quitclaim deed in December of 1970. The current use of the former NASG facility includes the Grosse Ile Commerce Park, Municipal Airport, and the 40-acre Detroit River International Wildlife Refuge. The airport leases buildings on 8 acres of land north of Groh Road to small, light industrial companies. A formally used defense site, or FUDS, is a facility or site that was under the jurisdiction of the Secretary of Defense and owned by, leased to, or otherwise possessed by the United States at the time of actions leading to contamination by a hazardous substance. By the Department of Defense's, or DOD's, Environmental Restoration Program, or DERP policy, the FUDS program is limited to those real properties that were transferred from DOD control prior to October 17th of 1986. FUDS properties can be located in the 50 states, the District of Columbia, territories, commonwealths, and possessions of the United States. Based on this property being owned by the United States under DOD jurisdiction prior to October 17th of 1986, the property that includes the AOCs that we're presenting here tonight makes them FUDS eligible. So the U.S. Army Corps is the lead agency for implementing the FUDS program in Michigan for the DOD and works with Eagle. Cleanup is accomplished by following the provisions of the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act, or CERCLA, and the National Oil and Hazardous Substances Pollution Contingency Plan, or NCP. This slide presents the stages of the CERCLA process in NCP. Remedial response activities for a FUDS site or FUDS project are completed under the DERP in the FUDS program policy consistent with this CERCLA process. CERCLA provides the process for cleanup response actions when there is a significant threat to human health or safety of the environment. The CERCLA process begins by conducting a preliminary assessment for a site to determine if there was a release of a hazardous substance, pollutant, or contaminant, and if additional investigation or action is required to determine if there's a threat to human health or the environment. If the preliminary assessment results include a recommendation for further investigation, then a site inspection is performed. And that determines whether a release or a potential release occurred. Remedial action then follows the site inspection, and that's performed to determine the nature and extent of contamination. If constituents or chemicals are present at concentrations that present risk to human health or safety to the environment, a feasibility study is completed. The preferred alternative is presented in a proposed plan, and then in consideration of public and stakeholder comments during the proposed plan, an alternative is selected and it's presented in a record of decision or a ROD. There are several former underground storage tanks or USTs that are also located at former NASG. These USTs are managed in accordance with the FUD's program policy. USACE is conducting environmental investigation activities at former NASG areas of concern, or AOCs, in accordance with the FUD's program policy. Investigation activities commenced in 1990, at which time the investigation identified 25 areas of concern across the former base. 12 of the AOCs would be investigated using the CERCLA process, and 13 would be investigated following the FUD's program policy as either regulated or unregulated underground storage tank sites between 1996 and now. 23 USTs were removed and investigated from multiple AOCs between 1993 and 1996. So the black boundary presented on this figure shows the FUD's project boundary. 25 AOCs were identified within that FUD's project boundary, and they are presented on the figure with a red boundary and a white label. The majority of the AOCs are located within the developed area of the current Grosse Ile Municipal Airport, north of the main runways. 5 AOCs are located on the east side of the facility, adjacent to the Detroit International Wildlife Refuge. So for purposes of this discussion tonight, these AOCs have been organized into the following groups based on their status in the CERCLA or other environmental investigations. So former non-regulated USTs were located at AOCs 5, 7, 10, and 21. Former fuel lines were present at AOC 17. Former regulated underground storage tanks were located at AOCs 1, 3, 4, 6, 8, 11, 13, and 18. And then remedial investigations are in progress at area of concerns 2 and 25. Proposed plans are in progress at AOCs 9, 14, and 19. And record of decisions or RODs are in progress at AOCs 12, 15, 16, 23, and 24A and 24B. AOC 22 is missing from this list, and that's because it was determined not to be an AOC, and so it's not discussed further in this presentation. So we'll start with the non-regulated USTs. A non-regulated tank includes those that contain fuel oil for consumptive purposes. They had a volume of less than 100 gallons, or they contained oil or fuel related to hydraulic lift and maintenance activities. And those were located at AOCs 5, 7, 10, and 21. The former fuel lines that were located at AOC 17 were approximately 500 feet long, and they ran north to south from the former fuel farm to the runway, or to the flight line, excuse me. The former fuel lines from AOC 1 USTs, they were abandoned and placed in 1993. Regulated USTs were located at AOCs 1, 3, 4, 6, 8, 11, 13, and 18. Regulated USTs are defined as tanks that store regulated substances such as aviation gasoline, diesel fuel, waste oil with a volume of greater than 100 gallons, and are regulated under the State of Michigan Part 211 of Public Act 451. Eagle agreed with the closure of the former non-regulated tanks at AOCs 5, 7, 10, and 21 in 2021. Eagle agreed with the closure of the former fuel lines at AOC 17 in 2021. And Eagle agreed with the closure of the former regulated tanks at AOCs 3, 4, 6, 8, 13, and 21. And that was in 2021 as well. Eagle agreed with the closure of the former regulated tank at AOC 11 in 2022. Environmental activities associated with the former regulated USTs are ongoing at AOC 1. 6 USTs that contained aviation gasoline or avgas were removed from the AOC in 1993. No free product was observed and no vapors were detected in nearby utility trenches and sewers during the tank removal. Free product is a substance that presents as a non-aqueous liquid that is not dissolved in water. Because visual staining of soil was observed during removal, a confirmed release associated with the USTs at AOC 1 was reported under the Part 213 regulatory framework. Environmental samples were collected over multiple investigations between 1993 and 2020, including soil and soil gas samples collected in September of 2020. Groundwater was not encountered in 2020, so groundwater could not be sampled. Data were screened against both the state of Michigan's applicable non-residential Part 213 risk-based screening levels and volatilization to indoor air potential or VIAP screening levels to evaluate for potential hypothetical future vapor intrusion risk if a non-residential building were to be constructed over that area in the yellow boundary. And this was all reported under what's called a final assessment report in June of 2022. Eagle agreed with that report in October of 2022, and USACE is planning for corrective action activities at AOC 1. I'm sorry, I think I jumped ahead here. CERCLA RIs, or remedial investigations, are in progress at AOCs 2 and 25. Proposed plans are in progress at areas of concern 9, 14, and 19. And records of decision, or RODs, are in progress at AOCs 12, 15, 16, 23, 24A, and 24B. The AOCs are presented based on their status in the RI, PP, and ROD phase of CERCLA. AOC 2 is located south of Groh Road and north of the taxiways and consists of Hangar 2, or former Building 25. Hangar 2 was constructed in 1928. During the Navy's tenure of the property, Hangar 2 was primarily used for aircraft storage, an administration building, and for flight training. In 1970, ownership of that land that comprises AOC 2 at former NASG was transferred to Grosse Ile Township. Hangar 2 is currently the main office of the Grosse Ile Airport. The airport leases space for storage of private aircraft to commercial businesses, such as a flight school, a lawyer's office, a surveyor's office, and a photography business. Previous investigations completed at AOC2 include an initial contamination evaluation in 1991. In 1993, one 10,000-gallon fuel oil tank, referred to as Tank 12, and one 1,200-gallon gasoline and fuel oil tank, referred to as Tank 3, were removed. An expanded field investigation was then completed in 1996. A phased remedial investigation was completed between 2001 and 2006, and that included the collection of soil, groundwater, and indoor air samples over multiple mobilizations to further characterize the AOC. Between 2008 and 2014, a supplemental remedial investigation was completed that included, again, the collection of soil, groundwater, geotechnical data, indoor air, and outdoor air samples. And most recently, between 2019 and 2020, USACE completed an RI addendum and additional soil, groundwater, soil vapor, indoor air, and outdoor air samples were collected to further characterize the AOC. USACE prepared an RI addendum report that includes a human health risk assessment on that previously collected data, and review of the RI addendum report is ongoing. AOC 25, the former skeet range, is located in the northernmost section of former NASG. Two adjoining semicircular former skeet shooting fields are present in that 1949 aerial photo shown on this slide. The area is currently used as recreational soccer and football fields. Most of this area was covered with soil and graded in 1998 by Grosse Ile Township. Other soil disturbances since 1998 have altered the ground surface in other parts of the AOC. Previous investigations at AOC 25 included a phased RI between 2003 and 2005. Based on the DoD's historical activities at the AOC, the only chemical that was investigated is lead. The results of the phased RI are summarized in the 2007 RI report. All lead concentrations in soil were less than the EPA residential standard except for one location. EPA residential standards are used to evaluate if unlimited use and unrestricted exposure conditions exist. The single location is surrounded by concentrations that are less than that EPA residential standard, and the soil is covered with grass. The Army prepared an RI addendum report on the previously collected data, and review of that RI addendum report is ongoing. Proposed plans are in progress at AOCs 9, 14, and 19. Previous investigations found site-related chemicals at concentrations that exceed applicable criteria. As documented in an RI report addendum prepared for each AOC, evaluation of risk to human health and the environment resulted in conclusions that no action is warranted for any of these AOCs. Eagle agreed with the conclusions that no action is warranted in each RI report addendum. USACE prepared proposed plans for AOCs 9, 14, and 19. Review of the no further action proposed plans for those AOCs is ongoing. A public comment period will begin when those proposed plans are finalized. And then the ROD phase, or the record of decision, will follow that public comment period. Records of decision, or RODs, are in progress at AOCs 15, 16, and 23. Previous investigations found site-related chemicals at concentrations that exceed applicable criteria. as documented in an RI report addendum prepared for each AOC, evaluation of risks to human health and the environment resulted in conclusions that no action is warranted. Eagle agreed with the conclusion that no action is warranted in each RI report addendum. Eagle also agreed with the no action proposed plans for AOCs 15, 16, and 23. The Army issued the no action determination proposed plans for each AOC for public comment on July 26 of 2022. The public comment period on those proposed plans ran from July 26 of 2022 to September 30th of 2022. A public meeting was held on September 14th of 2022. Written comments and comments received during the public meeting were considered in preparation of the RODs. No significant changes to the no action determinations were necessary or appropriate, and USACE is preparing the no action RODs for AOCs 15, 16, and 23. RODs, or Record of Decisions, are in progress at AOCs 12, 20, 24A, and 24B. Previous investigations found no site-related chemicals at concentrations that exceed applicable screening criteria. As documented in an RI report addendum prepared for each AOC, evaluation of risk to human health and the environment resulted in a conclusion that no action is warranted for AOCs 12 and 24A, and no further action is warranted for AOCs 20 and 24B. Eagle agreed with the respective no action and no further action conclusions in each report, RI report addendum. USACE prepared and Eagle agreed with the no action and no further action determination proposed plans. USACE issued a no action and no further action determination proposed plan for each AOC for public comment on September 1st of 2021. The public comment period for those proposed plans ran from September 1st of 2021 to December 14th of 2021. USACE conducted a public meeting on those proposed plans on November 30th of 2021, and written comments and comments received during the public meeting were considered in preparation of the RODs. No significant changes to the no action and no further action determinations were necessary or appropriate. The RODs for AOCs 20, 24A, and 24B are being finalized, and the review of AOC 12 ROD is ongoing. Annual informational public meetings are held each year in accordance with the Community Relations Plan. The Army Corps welcomes public comments regarding environmental response activities. Public comments can be submitted to Mike Maddox, the Public Affairs Specialist, at the address identified on the slide. Leave that up for a moment if anybody wants to write anything down. Okay.
Ken, you have a question?
So, I'm Commander Jim Samurai, I'm a former 36 years U.S. Navy fuels officer, and did a lot of Navy stuff around here. So, what I am surmising, I know some of the folks from the Army Corps of Engineers, and okay, I'm Jim Samurai, 36 years U.S. Navy. I was a fuels officer for the Secretary of the Navy. And I had done a lot of work with the Navy League. So what I'm reading from this report is, this is actually pretty good. I mean, from what I'm understanding here. We used to do some events here for the Navy, Navy League, Canada, etc. And so, from a fuel sky, looks like some of the events were in 2020. I know for a fact, having dealt with fuel spills with the big Great Lakes freighters and stuff like that, and Red Hill in Hawaii and some of the other fuel depots for the U.S. Navy, that fuel is a biological substance. So by nature, even in the Gulf of Mexico, where I worked, one of the solutions was to put enzymes in the fuel because it actually deteriorates. It's a biological agent. It's not like plastic. Over time, it actually disintegrates. It's eaten up by microorganisms. So this base, even the fuel tanks, which have become a big concern for throughout the world, quite honestly, is of concern, especially if they have vapors, maybe there's some residue of fuel in the bottom which has been polluted by water. I mean, those have to be removed, okay? And that's being done. But from my observation, and I'd be interested in your opinion, but I was looking through this presentation, and it looks like all the AOCs are basically from the analysis of the fuel, of the soil and the fuel samples, except for a few spots where you could put yellow tape around. Most of those, the findings were, the conclusion is they're safe, except for maybe a couple areas which would require further investigation. Would you either validate my assumption, because some of this stuff was pretty sophisticated, but I paid close attention to it. And it looks like, from the analysis, everything looks pretty clean around here on Grosse Ile. So I'd be interested in what the concerns areas of the AOCs are, because I didn't see it from this report.
You want to talk on this one?
Yeah.
I can jump up some slides, or do you want to talk generally?
Are we
It's
have one
mostly-
more slide?
Yeah, that's all right.
Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Commander Jim Semerad. I'm with the Shipmasters, deal with the Great Lakes freighters, and I retired from 36 years U.S. Navy.
Well, thank you, sir, for your service, first of all. But you are correct. When we started out our investigation, we had 25 AOCs, and those are areas that we focused on and did our studies. And we're down to 2 remaining sites. One is the AOC 25, that was the former skeet range. And we know, a lot of details about it now so we've been studying it from a historical perspective as well as looking at environmental analysis. And the other one is at AOC 2, which is the former airplane hangar. So there is some groundwater that we're investigating there. And there is potential, like with groundwater, to cause some vapors. But all of the underground storage tanks have been cleaned up. We have one more at AOC, it's AOC 1, right, where we have some soil removal, but there was just some residual contamination that we couldn't get to at the time when they did the tank removals. But they've cleaned up all of the underground storage tanks, all that's been pulled, and we've closed those sites out. So anyway, I think it's a good success story compared to a lot of our sites where we don't get all of our investigations closed. Does that answer your question, or did you have a second part?
2 sites, and do I understand correctly that this is still a commercial private airport requiring gasoline, avgas, JP8 for flying airplanes.
So you can, where did Kim go? Is that Janelle? Do you want to? Right, so, yeah, maybe, you want to take that, Janelle, or?
So the answer is yes, we do sell avgas and JEG and above ground fuel tanks.
And you still have that requirement. I used to manage fuel farms for aircraft carriers and Aegis cruisers. So I'm very familiar with, and I was a fuels management officer. So I know fuels. And if this is an active commercial airfield, just like DTW, I mean, I know people at Delta Airlines, and they got some big tank farms out there. So you're gonna have a requirement to have those under investigation anyway, and they have to be annually, they have to
Annually
be.
tested and.
Absolutely.
They're tested daily for certain requirements, they're tested weekly for certain requirements, and, we test them annually, sometimes biannually, depending on,
It's gotta be annual.
yeah.
Okay. So right now, there's just two areas of concern.
That's from the former, at the FUD site, right? So that's, I mean, those are our
And I
sites.
apologize, because I'm not from the Grosse Ile area. but-
Well, neither are we, so we, we understand that, but no, that's, those are good questions, important. I think personally, from a lot of the sites that I've worked on, that I feel like there's a good success here.
Actually, this is a very important meeting for all the residents of Grosse Ile. They need to understand that this is not a contaminated site and that it's being looked at very carefully. And I have some friends that are residents up here, including their former supervisor.
Thank you. Do you want to go ahead and take any more questions now, or we had a couple more slides
Are you
if we wanted to.
participation?
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't know.
Yeah.
you were-
It's all
Well,
right.
that's okay. I
Why-
thought you
why
might
don't
go
you
ahead and
finish?
finish it.
You asked
Yeah.
us to wait until you were finished.
All right, thank you. No,
I
it's,
didn't know what that meant up there, that's why.
yeah, this is just the location, so all the reports that are published for this site, they are held at a public repository. It's at the Trenton Veterans Memorial Library now. So there are paper copies of every report if you want to review them. There's also electronic copies as well. And now, questions. I would just ask when you ask a question, if you're given a comment, can you state your name so we have that for the transcript, please?
Hi, Joe Porcerelli. I'm a township trustee. I've got to kind of say how I've gotten involved in this. It's been almost 6 years. And I first got involved by just coming to the original meetings and seeing what, all of you were doing here. And it was Grosse Ile, obviously. And at that time, I was the police chief, and I care about where I live and where my kids are down here playing and so on and so forth. So I found out that we talked about AOC 25 back then even. And they couldn't come up with the paperwork to show that it was tested back. I noticed the one slide that you had up, ma'am,
Yeah.
that it said back in I think it was 03, you said that it was tested and somewhat remediated. Well, when I couldn't find any paperwork or coming to your meeting, you guys really weren't sure. I filed a FOIA and it was empty. And there was nothing that was done, apparently. Well, how about this? Let's just say I found nothing because the FOIA was empty, that it appeared nothing was done. And there was some back and forth, and I'm not sure if the same gentleman, I mean, there's a lot of turnover. Is Charles still the public, he's not the public information officer, is he?
He is, but he's been deployed right now to Hawaii.
Oh.
So we have Mike Maddox.
Okay, because Charles,
that's
there was a gentleman named Clayton Hayes I dealt with. I don't know if he's still around.
Clayton's still
Is
around.
he still around? Okay. Well, we had a conference call, and the three of us. And Clayton told me, he said, well, it wasn't tested. We can't find the paperwork. So what we're going to do is we already have a company that we've picked that's going to retest for lead. And I said, that's all I asked for, because there's thousands of children that not only play here, but it's the same children, a lot of them, day after day because of soccer and Little League football. So I thought, why wouldn't we retest it if you can't find anything, so we're positive it's safe? That's all. That's how I got involved. Well, now it's really about 6 years later, and now you've showed me up on the slide that you found something that showed there was something done in '03, and then I have an email from Charles. Now, the email, I wanted to ask Charles about, I was hoping he was going to be here tonight, but the email stated that they weren't going to test it now for these reasons. And then when you read what you sent us, I'm sorry, I don't know if this was in the mail or if this was an email, but this was the thing that was sent to us.
The fact sheet?
Yeah, on the back of it, it does show that there's still, you're looking at it further. So I guess my question is, and I every time I come here, I know I beat a dead horse with you guys, and we go over it and we go over it, and really, I have to be honest with you, there's a lot of frustration because I'm not seeing an answer. The question is, can somebody stand up today from this group and tell me that AOC 25 area, which they couldn't tell me exactly where, now you showed me a picture, this is the truth, I've never seen that picture before, and I've been here to many meetings. Now, maybe I missed it, and I apologize, but it was a picture from 1946 or something, but I'm not sure if that's in the middle of the soccer field or in the middle of the Little League football field, I can't tell.
I think it's under a concession stand building
Oh,
in
is
that
where it's at?
area.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's right near the Little League football
But,
field.
yeah, let's go back to, first of all, I can't speak for what was discussed, but we've had the data that was collected. There's a wealth of data actually on the site, all of the quality control data, all of that. It was analyzed and it's reported on, all the data that's available from that 2003, 2002 timeframe when we did the sampling at the site is presented in the RI report, the 2007 RI report. The 2000.
It's Ellis you're talking about, right?
Ellis Environmental, I think, did it? Yeah, right.
Okay.
It's in the Trenton Library, and it shows the exact spots where tests were made and what was in them.
Okay, so.
That's what I'm saying. That report's been available since 2007.
Well, that's fine, but they couldn't find it, and I couldn't find it, and that's why I've been coming every year. So my question to you is, it's a very simple question. An AOC 25, can somebody stand up from this group and say, yes, it's safe for those thousands of children to be on there and to be okay and to play without a problem for the amount of lead that's there? Because your results, see, the email that Charles sent me had no data or data, whichever you want to call it. It didn't have anything on it. It was very subjective as opposed to objective facts.
Okay, so, I mean, I don't mean to interrupt you, but
Well-
what's, part of what you're not seeing and what people aren't realizing is that, so we started additional work, evaluate the data, reevaluate the data. Other sites got delayed, so we have a contract that has 20 sites on it. Sites got delayed. Some of the studies got done on those sites. All along, we've known that there was only one spot on that site. So besides having the low amount of contamination based on all the available data, we also knew that there was clean fill that was placed on it, on top of it. We have records of it. We have the diagrams of when Grosse Ile turned it into a soccer field. We have investigations where the Army Corps went out before it was ever made a soccer field, found no debris, then it was covered. So there's all those things that put together, and based on what we know about the site, yes, it's safe for the children to play soccer on there. I think I told you that last time when we were here
No.
maybe, but,
I'm sorry you didn't, but.
okay, well.
I wouldn't be here again. I would
Okay,
not be here
but-
again if you told me that.
Okay.
I understand very well. I'm not trying to be argumentative with you.
Me
But
either.
it's been 5 years of nothing that I've gotten, and that's why why would I keep coming back?
Well,
I wouldn't
we
keep
have-
coming back
we
if I
have
got
had
an
our-
answer.
We have had our annual meetings, and we've been telling you all that, like I said, what happened was, the work that we had after 2007, there was a contract that we had 2010, that contractor, and that contract ran out before they finished their work. And then we had another contract that was offered between 2012 to 2017. Then another one, that one ran out there's 25 sites, so we're doing work, right? May not be exactly on 25, but the work is getting done. And on priority sites, sites that we think that there might be a concern where there's some human health exposure or potential risk. So moving down the timeline, the meeting that we came here in 2019, I think it was, at that meeting, I think you asked me about if the children were safe. There had been incidents of brain cancer or something with the children at the high school. Maybe it wasn't you, but someone else. But regardless, we had a contract. It ran out in 2020. We got a new contractor, and they're here.
That is absolutely correct, because you told me we can't answer tonight because the contractor isn't here. And that was that meeting that I was at also. And then we went on a couple virtual meetings the next few years
Right,
that I
so-
was on. And ma'am, I'm not trying to argue, but thank you. I'm done then. If I would have gotten an answer, I mean, I'd still be here because I'm very interested
Okay,
in
well,
what you do.
maybe we
If there was
we
an
said
answer,
it,
but
but it was
Charles
indirect or something.
and Clayton wouldn't have said, we have got somebody, this was just a couple of years ago. I have it all documented because they couldn't find any paperwork that apparently you have.
Right,
And
we've
thank you.
had it, so I
That-
don't know what,
Then-
I can't speak to that.
Yeah,
but
I'm just trying to say thank you
I
then.
apologize if there was some kind of miscommunication, but
Well,
Charles, he's not the technical person, and Clayton is the project manager.
right.
I work in the environmental, am a technical person. I do the risk assessments, and I've been looking at the soil data at that site, how it was distributed, et cetera. And I'm very comfortable to tell you that the children are safe to play there.
That's,
You probably have a lot more lead in your backyard.
well,
or
thank you then. That's
near
all I'm asking.
road,
And
so.
it's only, I'm done then. Thank you. You won't have to see me again. Well, you may be seeing me,
Well,
but.
and just so you know, so the person that I'm backfilling for, he's been deployed. So right now he's in Poland. And
Oh, I thought you
so
meant Charles.
you did say we have changeover.
Yeah.
And we have, and that's caused a lot of delays. I don't want to blame it on the fact, but he's been deployed. He's active military. And, sometimes that causes delays too. And so, it's like starting and stopping. When you get a new job, right? You kind of get thrown into stuff and you have to learn things. And that's sort of what goes on with us. We have, like Ben, he took over from Clayton, and Clayton
Oh, okay.
is still there at the Corps, but he's got a different set of projects. Now he's working on Superfund projects, and Ben's on the FUD. So we all wear different hats, but
I fully understand.
yeah, and
thank
we're
you.
trying to be
That's all I-
open and clear with this. It is taking a while to get the report done, but we're close. And we believe that report will have enough historical information, things in it, so hopefully that'll answer and alleviate some of your
You've
concern.
answered the question tonight. I
Thank
finally,
you.
thank you, this is the first time in 5 years that I've gotten that answer, or I wouldn't keep coming back. It's that simple.
Well, I apologize.
I'm getting
that we
older, but I still
couldn't-
got a pretty good memory.
Well, I remembered your first name, so that was.
walked in, you said, here he comes.
No, I didn't say
Yes, you
that.
did. Oh, there you go. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
My name is Kyle DeBose. I'm also a trustee with Grosse Ile Township. I followed this for a little bit longer. I was on the last annual meeting where I had some questions. It's good to hear you say what you just said. I do have a younger kid. He has played soccer on that field, so I'm aware of the risks and have let him play soccer there, because I do think that's also a public health risk, right? When kids are scared and they don't want to play soccer, I want them to be playing soccer and having fun. That said, I hear you saying that. There still feels like some confusion to me around this, and that you mentioned the 2007 report that talked about 2003 data. In that report, the 2007 report, there was concerns around lead, from my understanding and my read of it. If I'm wrong about that, please let me know. And it's my understanding that not last annual meeting, but the one before, you all said that you would test those fields further. And then it was last year where you said that you wouldn't test it. So it's just been very confusing, the messages we've gotten on Area of Concern 25. It's say there's a problem, we're going to test. There's not a problem, we're not going to test. So for me, I would like more testing to be done there. Even hearing you say it's safe, just to be sure it's safe there, And that's the main comment that I wanted to say.
My name is Cal Kirchin. I'm with Congresswoman Dingell's office. I appreciate you all being here today. I had a couple of more technical questions about, one, the lead standard that's being used at the site. Just wanted to see if you could quickly clarify what standard that is, and then have some follow-up questions. I assume it's the residential standard at 400 parts per million?
Yes,
Okay.
it is.
So, and how do we come to that standard, I guess? Is that statutorily required? And I don't mean to be rhetorical or to ask obvious questions, but how do you all come to, we're going to be using the residential standard?
How do we come to it?
Yes.
Well, we follow CERCLA guidelines,
Right.
and residential standard assumes that that property can be lived on without any potential risk.
Have, in your experience, anyone is welcome to answer, have you all ever seen other information used that changed the parts per million standard of a given site where you have lead contamination?
It depends on the site and the basis of it. Like a lead smelter, for example, they're going to have a different cleanup, and whether or not you're cleaning up to industrial land use is 800.
Right.
So 800 milligrams per kilogram.
Right.
But there are other things. If there's something that's like a threatened endangered species that occurs there, there may be some sensitivity. But lead in soil is, it occurs naturally, first of all, and the concentrations that we measured there and where we got the detections were what we believe in the fill material, not in the actual native soil.
So the lead was in the fill just to be...
Not just lead
Yeah.
was everywhere. It's in
Right.
almost every sample that we've taken throughout Grosse Ile. Just about every soil sample has lead in it,
Right.
just varying degrees, different amounts.
And the average across the site, I think, was 232 parts per million.
That was a 95% UCL, not the average.
Where are we at now?
That's a good question.
Okay.
It's a very good question. Because
Yes.
at the time when they collect, I'm Bill Harmon, by the way, I'm with the state.
Hey, Bill.
And then at the time when they collected the data, the method they used to collect soil samples has changed.
Okay.
So what we look for now is a more comprehensive sample set where we can actually get a representative concentration for a specific area. It wasn't done that way at that time, which is one of the issues regarding whether or not we can definitively say it is above or below a certain criteria.
Right.
So that's one of the things that we, the state, have asked the Army Corps to look for. We've asked them to, AOC 25, I don't know if it was said or not, it was a shooting range.
Yes.
For heat range primarily.
Mhm.
So you're gonna have, potentially you're gonna have areas where the shot's gonna fall, where you're gonna have higher concentrations than other areas.
Yep.
So these areas of higher concentrations would represent different types of areas that we should separate out if we can and sample them separately so we don't mix them all together. That makes sense. Because we're gonna,
So, for instance, if the average is 232, just for instance,
right, that's fine.
but we've got a place that has 1,700 parts per million, for instance, you're saying that it might be wise to separate out that section.
In the
It could be
2007 RI, if you look in Appendix G, I think is what it is.
wise. Right.
It could be, and it depends on how you want to use the property in the future.
Right.
We would design the sampling to support that use.
Right.
So, first of all, your 1,700, we did have one reading, 1,700. We find that,
Yes.
Grand Rapids, Michigan, we had a couple of places where we assumed there was just a piece of pelletized lead or something.
Yeah.
We don't know, but we have these really high numbers and everything else is low. But the sample that you're talking about was surrounded below and to the sides of it by sample concentrations that were well less than 400.
Got it.
So what you're talking about is 1,700, which a lot of times statistically, you may throw that out because it's an outlier, when all the other samples were less. So a lot of times if we have a residential property, for example, that we're evaluating, not using residential criteria, because that gets us to a different place
Right.
than whether or not somebody's actually going to put a house on there or it's zoned as residential. We'll look at a quarter-acre plot, for example. And what they did in, there's some of that in the 2007 RI where they assumed that maybe they'd put a house here and draw a quarter-acre plot. But what we were going to do and how we were going to address it in 2007, and then through the 3 different contracts that were led after that, changed. We learned more about it. When we started the project, we didn't know that the Grosse Ile Township had put fill material over it. We got the grading plans. We talked to the engineer that did it, that designed it. We talked to the parks director. We've interviewed a lot of people. So we did our, what I feel like our due diligence, trying to find out what all was put there. And again, prior to any of that happening, the Corps of Engineers did inspections of that site and found no debris. And on active skeet ranges, or skeet ranges that we clean up, my experience has been that there's stuff everywhere. You don't just get rid of it. And that we believe, based on the low use and all these other things, you know. So those are in the report.
We have asked Army Corps, all that information she's talking about, we've asked the Army Corps to put that together in a comprehensive report.
Right.
And then we can have all that information to see what they're using to support the conclusions that they're making. That's the report she's talking about that they're working on and it's under review right now.
Right.
So we've asked them, you know, for historical aerial photos, determine the location of the skeet range, determine the location of the where the targets would have been, or where we might find shot zones. See if they could determine the fill area, so we can try to geographically locate the location where the fill was put. So then we can make a determination where the areas that were sampled back in 2007 were relevant to what we have exposure today. And whether or not the areas were covered with fill. Now, if the areas were covered with fill, that could be an issue, because then if we want to go out and resample an area that's covered with fill, who put the fill there? And if we happen to find lead in the fill, which could possibly happen, then you have a potential liability associated with whomever put that fill there. Because we don't always check the fill where it came from. So we have a lot of these issues that we're trying to work through. Plus, again, they're putting together that information all together with aerial photos, the maps, trying to get as much information they can on location of the fill, and then what their conclusions are relative to that information. Once they get that to us, we can review it and make a determination whether or not we agree.
Do you have documentation of that, Phil, somewhere?
The fill? That's what they were trying to find.
I think that's part of the challenge.
We do have documentation of some of it. So yes, I mean, we have copies of checks that were written, and there's some Grosse Ile Township master plan that describes some of the information, some of the grants that were awarded that paid for it. And we've interviewed,
When I FOIA'd it, was nothing?
No, because we just put all this stuff together since the last meeting. That's one of the things I've been doing. That's not what I normally do, you know, as a risk assessor, but I've been trained to find that. It's really outside of the scope of what the contractor was to do and trained. So anyway,
It's all gonna be part of it.
yes, and I think it's gonna tell the story of the site, which we didn't know before. And we've pieced, you know, it's hard to go back, think about this, like they showed that figure from 1940s, and then you have a nice aerial photograph that's out here over the steps, and you can't see any part of, no longer, in the 50s, you can't see any more of the skeet range. So it's really hard to figure out what was going on, why they put that skeet range there at the time, and some other things, when there was a baseball diamond on the same place. So there was a lot of stuff about the site. Now, you ask about sampling, right? So we have certain requirements. I understand that there's concern about the sampling, but at this point, we decided not to take more samples. The 2007 RI data is what we've been using. And that's what we've reanalyzed and looked at.
We're looking at that in addition to all the other information that we have.
Mhm.
We're preparing that in a report, which is why it's not final, so which is why you probably didn't get that when you did a FOIA request. I mean, I wasn't involved in that FOIA request,
I
so I can't
understand.
really say, but it seems like it's one of those things that we're developing still right now, and it's not ripe for that yet.
Right, like our
Glad to see there's new, I don't wanna call it new documentation, because apparently you're saying it's always been there, you just didn't have it. So there was a miscommunication, obviously, and now, thank you for your word by saying that, and there won't be, so I understand the next step, just so I know where we're going. There not, probably won't be, but there won't be any further testing, when I say testing, sampling of that area then?
Not at this time. We're not planning on it, but the reports.
People the right answer at the next meeting.
Well, we're in the middle of the circle process,
Yep.
and we're doing that report now. And then as we move forward, that gets you through, you know, your proposed plan and decision document. And that all has to be vetted through, you know,
Through our
your
experts,
as
too.
lead agent. Yes, and then the regulator and the stakeholders all get, you know, have an opportunity to participate. The public will have an opportunity to participate in that when we get to a proposed plan. But right now, we're still in the middle of this circular process. We haven't gotten there yet.
It's a remedial investigation phase, and that phase is iterative, right? So as you learn more, sometimes you have to go back and redo it, but I feel confident that we're going to get that report, finish its review, and get all that out soon. But we're facing, again, you know, furlough might happen. And so there could be delays that we can't foresee, but anyway, we believe that we're.
Just to, and I apologize, I don't want to hog it up. I just wanted to close the loop on sort of the line of questioning that was coming after. Bill, I appreciate your response, and also I appreciate yours too. I also feel more confident hearing them say that, because I think what a lot of us were basing it off of was the information in that 2007 report. And some of the concerns coming out of that, speaking with, you know, colleagues at EPA and what have you too, as well as Eagle, is well, we're at the 400 parts per million standard now, but how much longer is that standard going to live? And it's not going to last that much longer. And both at the federal level, you know, politics barring, and then certainly at the state level, we're going to see that about halved. So if the average was 232 parts per million, you can understand why, from a public health standpoint, we're begging the question, well, is that really up to scruff in today's world? So I think that you have answered.
That's a great point, but yet remember how those standards are developed. Standards are developed based on a 30-year exposure for residential scenarios.
Yeah.
So you have to remember how that's developed. When you're talking a soccer field, if we were to develop criteria or those values just for the soccer field specifically,
Yeah.
the numbers would be higher because the exposure is much lower. Exposure is not much. So we have to put that all into context. And again, that's part of what they're doing. They're putting together this information in the report. All those lines of evidence. The sampling that was done, again, the sampling that's been done in 2007 is problematic on its own, because you go out and pull a discrete soil sample. Does that mean, I pull one sample here, right here, does that mean the whole room is contaminated? No, you can't say that, because it doesn't represent the entire room. So we have to design our sampling to be representative of an area, a specific area that we're trying to evaluate. And that's key. But if we combine what they did in 2007 with other lines of evidence, like the aerial photos, areas where they put fill in and things like that, we can make a better judgment. But I do agree with her that, well, the information we have, the risk would be very low, and we're not supposed to use the word safe. I don't know, somebody told me that a long time ago. But it would not be an imminent concern from the state perspective for anybody using the field.
So can I say something?
Yeah.
So Commander Summerad here again, and I am an engineer, and I know Deb Dingle, so thank you very much for coming in here and presenting it. So I look at not only Selfridge, but Grayling, the military bases in Florida, Norfolk, San Diego, Seattle, Montana, South Dakota, etc. And there's some areas that you need to quarantine off, okay, because they are contaminated, okay? If the missile range in South Dakota, that's contaminated, okay? So they have Minuteman missile silos there, okay? So I am thinking, and I'm thinking out loud, this is a skeet range. So my casings, I am going to collect because I'm going to be shooting from, I'm a rifleman, I have a rifle. So I'm going to be shooting lead at a skeet, which is clay, okay? So I'm not worried about the clay, okay? But I'm worried about the lead from the bullet, okay? So it's going to contaminate the area, and I'm going to shoot in a specific direction. Now, lead, if I am an engineer scientist, on the periodic table of elements, is a very heavy element. So by nature, it will sink. Correct?
Oh, well, you guys are the experts.
I mean, by nature, on the periodic table of elements, lead is a very heavy element. There's probably more lead in the city of Detroit than there is lead in the skeet range in Clarkston or Lake Orion or Trenton or whatever. And we're shooting a lot of bullets, okay? We're shooting a lot of bullets. Now we're covering it up with soil. And lead by nature, according to Newton's theory, is going to sink, not percolate to the ground level. So if we're covering it up with soil and lead is sinking, do we really have a problem? Or should we just quarantine that area off where the shooting was going to occur, such that where they're playing soccer or baseball is not even in the vicinity of lead? Because I don't think lead permeates 10 feet away to this guy. So if I have lead here, and to your point, if I do a ground sampling here, and it's contaminated, like we did at Selfridge, Air National Guard Base, if I go 18 inches away, I may find that exact same soil sample completely clean.
You're absolutely right.
But within that perimeter, and so now if I do a testing and I find that there's a contamination, I have to then, by USA standards, I have to sample within a certain radius, okay? And so within that radius, I'm going to determine whether I do have a contaminated area, maybe 5 feet, maybe 50 feet, maybe 500 yards. So from what I conclude from AOC 25, we are free and clear, but that's only my opinion.
No, your opinion is straightly spot on. That's why it's so that's why when you take a single sample and you try to make a decision on it, somebody's going to look at it and say, well, that's so hot. And then somebody's going to say, well, that's just one sample. But when you collect a sample, you want a sample that's representative of the area you're concerned about, just like you said. So you decide what is the area you're concerned about, and you sample it properly, then you make a decision relative to that specific area. We don't necessarily have that because it was done so long ago, but again, they're putting together the lines of evidence that we can use to support in hopes of making a decision that we can all get behind and support.
Can I add 1 second to this? See, the issue wasn't with me, and that was, obviously you're a deep thinker because you're very educated in this area. I get it.
I know science. I know
That's a wonderful thing.
quantum mechanics, and the periodic table elements.
That will help, except it didn't help because the people I was dealing with didn't know where that range was. If it was in the middle of that football field, it was in the middle. That was the only issue. I have no issue what any of you are saying. The problem was previous to this meeting today, nobody knew where it was located, so nobody knew where the high concentration was as opposed to the low concentration.
Right,
Exactly
well,
right, that's, again, that's what we've asked them to do.
Yes, so thank you.
so we have range fans now, we've gone back, we have different design skeet ranges, and we also, have found out new information that there were 3 skeet ranges on
More than
Grosse
those
Ile.
pictures, correct.
Well,
They rotated them, they told me.
well, what we found out that the qualification ranges were indoor. So they weren't, this was a recreational skeet range. They had baseball practice at the field and so that's some of the information that we have documented in the report, so hopefully.
Thank you for that added.
I think,
Obviously, that helps.
And that report will be part of the admin record once it's available.
So
and
it's
that will
foyable.
be used for the basis for the proposed plan that's after that the public will be invited to attend the meeting on.
Hey everybody, my name is Tyler Marava. I'm with State Senator Darren Camilleri's office. Thanks for coming tonight. We really appreciate it. So I feel like I've sent 1 million emails to Eagle this year discussing this issue, making sure that our Grosse Ile residents feel safe using these soccer and football fields. And so an email that I received from Eagle earlier in the year in about May stated that they recommended that the Army Corps of Engineers develop a representative sampling plan. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and so it sounds like, is there a fundamental disagreement then between Eagle and the Army Corps of Engineers on the need for that?
Until we see all the information that they said that putting together to document location of the ski range, just like you said, that's key.
Mm-hmm.
Where the fill is, and then we can make a determination whether or not we should go back and resample, whether it makes sense.
Okay.
If they go back to resample, absolutely, we want a representative sample.
Okay, and then the way I understand it is with this report, before it gets published, Eagle and the Army Corps of Engineers kind of have to shake hands and agree on it, correct?
That's preferred.
It's preferred. So in the case of Eagle making one recommendation and the Army Corps of Engineers making another, how do those deadlocks get resolved?
We go up through it's through resolution process.
Okay. Is that anticipated?
No.
No? Okay.
Not this-
Okay. And then my second question is just, do we have an updated timeline on when the report will be made available?
oh, I get to answer that one, huh? We're planning to have it, what we hope. Now, it's out of our control right now. Other agencies are reviewing it, Army agencies. But we want to have it to Eagle by the end of the month. That's
Okay.
our goal, but it may not be until December. And if we get furloughed, it'll be whenever we can.
Right. And that's like for Eagle to review it and then send back their recommendations?
They
So
have-
it'll be next
We give
year?
them 30 days unless they
Okay.
request more.
45.
Okay.
Yeah, 45.
Okay.
Okay.
So it'll be like next year for sure?
February, maybe.
Okay.
Before the public sees it, is that right? February?
Pardon me?
Before the public sees it in February?
Probably.
You'd probably get Eagle comments back.
Yeah, well, that would be getting, if we don't send it, then we won't get their comments back till February, so.
Okay. Thank you
I
very
think
much.
we have a June, maybe, or something like that. I can't remember what we have in the schedule, but it keeps slipping because of all these, like I said, delays and things, but we try to work out, when you ask about disagreements, we have those on multiple sites. Everybody has their own opinion about how to do things and stuff, so we just have to give people confidence that what we put in the report and enough supporting evidence and things can come to the same conclusion that we have.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
My name's Kevin Flavin, and my address is Park Lane on Grosse Ile. Thank you very much for everybody that's attending this meeting tonight. I know that some of you came from far away, and I appreciate that, and I think everybody on the island appreciates that. This historically has had political overtones to it on the island, and not political in the sense that the Army Corps, but political in how it was handled by former or past administrations and former supervisors and managers. So when Commander Summeride, were you asked to attend this meeting by a former supervisor?
No, a very personal, close friend. And we used to have some Navy League events here at the base when it was an active base. And, you know, I'm a national historian for the Navy. I was a national historian for the Navy. So Grosse Ile has a lot of history from a Navy and military standpoint. And it's changing a lot. So.
I appreciate that. I guess my question is, did Supervisor Loftus, former Supervisor Loftus, ask you to make comments about?
No, and okay. I know him. I know not only him, but his brother, and I used to work at the John Dingle VA Medical Center, and actually a former resident, our chief engineer used to live on Grosse Ile. But, you know, I'm interested in the future of Grosse Ile. And
well,
obviously we got to do some cleanup here.
That, you said earlier you felt that it was in pretty good shape, and now you're saying you feel that we still have cleanup to do?
No, I think compared to, say, Selfridge, I mean, there's parts of Selfridge, and, you know, being a fuels officer, where the tank farm used to be, we've isolated that. I mean, there are no people, there's no football fields or baseball fields. You know, you're not going to build it on a tank farm, okay? The baseball fields, the golf course, and everything is over on the other side of the base. You're not going to get any contamination of the fuel farm or the skeet shooting or whatever over there. And that, I single out Selfridge, but I could be talking about Pensacola, Florida. I could be talking about Camp Pendleton in San Diego. I could be talking about any other military base, the Nevada test site.
So, I'm sorry to interrupt you, and thank you for that response. I think that a lot of the people on Grosse Ile who are newer to the island don't really have a concept of what has been done. People that have not been here, have lived here since the projects have been completed or have been in the process. There are a lot of people that do not understand what has happened here, what has been taken care of. And I don't know, have there been interim reports as the work has progressed?
There's a lot of reports that are available at the library.
So if a resident wanted to find out what information was available or what projects have been completed and what the status is, they could go to the library. Do we know that whether there's anything in the township documentation that backs up what the township has done or how they've participated?
Well, that is outside of the, you know, what the Army Corps of Engineers is tasked with. We look at historically, so the management of the Grosse Ile Township, et cetera. We do send them copies of the reports, don't we? Or do we? I don't remember about that, but they are available, and if there's something you can't find, you can always contact Mike Maddox, the name, or one of us, or Bill. The Eagle has, right, they have copies of the reports. We put them out there. They're publicly available. We want people to read them. But they are, some of them can be horrendous. You know, if you're, just the list of acronyms that we were talking about, you know, it's like alphabet soup, I guess.
It would be nice for the residents to have an idea and a document that explains and goes over all of that information.
Well, we tried, we try to make the informational meeting. That's what this is. Some sites have a restoration advisory board where the community gets together. We have a community relations plan, how we relay the information. We are required, we try to
I
be
think
open about it and get
that's
everything
fantastic.
out. But we want you to ask questions if you don't understand the reports.
So there is another, will it be a final report, or will this be?
Well, go back to the CERCLA process. So if you, so CERCLA is our operating regulation. It's what we fall under, and each one of those are reports. So preliminary,
Get a final report.
right, preliminary assessment, site inspection. So you go out and you look at the site, may not know anything about it. There's a lot of history that you look at. The next step is a site inspection. There you do a lot of sampling in the areas where you think there would be contamination. So like they were talking about a UST tank, you're not going to sample across the road from it. You're going to sample underneath it, right? So if you find stuff there that exceeds residential standards, because that's what we use as our criteria if there's a problem, then we go into the remedial investigation. Some remedial investigations can take 10 to 15 years. The DOE, some of theirs have been going on for 20 years, right? So that can take a long time, and it's an iterative process. And if you notice on our, a lot of times you'll hear the word supplemental or addendum, because we found out something else. We finished the report, but we found out something else. And we're spending public funds, right? We're taxpayer dollars. We have to be cognizant and make sure when we make a recommendation to spend that money and take that action, we need to be sure that we're doing it for the right reasons, not, for.
A lot of folks on the island, because of there is such a lot of information but some folks feel that they haven't seen it, so that there's something, no information means something is being
Various
hidden.
or something.
Yeah, and that may, I have not seen that, I have not seen that at all, but the communications between you and the community and the township, hopefully the township will continue to provide further information so that everybody knows that whether, or what has happened and what you all have done. So
I
thank
think
you.
we do post stuff on the township's website, but, was this meeting helpful, the format that it was in? If you have recommendations or want to see more or whatever, please let us know, because
It's very nice that it's like in this setting and also being recorded so other people can see it in the community.
Yeah, we had virtual, I have to say that the last meeting we had, the virtual meeting, we only had 2 people. That was, yeah, so, well, Janelle was there and Derek, so. Yeah, so, yeah, we understand there was difficulty. It's difficult for everybody, but because of COVID, so
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Each one of these reports, that is part of the administrative record, and so they're administrative record files. So we have those available to the public, and we posted the library. And then you can also reach out to Mike Maddox if you want to pull that slide back up,
Yeah.
so that they can write down that information again if they need to.
And he'll get to one of us if needed, but we'll get you what you need.
But we do a community relations plan for each project or property, and so we try to work through that with the community of the best way to communicate with the public. We don't do annual meetings like this for all of our sites. This is something that we decided to do for this particular site because of the interest from the community. There wasn't enough information or support for the Restoration Advisory Board, which was more involved. So we decided we would do an annual meeting with you guys to help you guys along with identifying the information that's out there and try to, present that to you of what's progressed. So we're trying to make sure that you guys that the community is aware of what we're doing. And obviously if we're not doing the best job of getting that information out, we're open to revising that. That community relations plan is something that we look at, it's an iterative document. We try to look at it to make sure that we're doing what should be done to try to get the information to the public. And, I think we realize that virtual isn't necessarily the best option here. For this community, there's other sites where virtual was very successful and even more successful than in-person meetings. So we're trying to work through that, and so definitely if there's something that you feel like we could do better, or different places we could advertise, different places we could put information, then certainly let us know, because that's something we can put into our community relations plan to make sure that we're doing that
Thank you very much,
communication.
thank you. The other part of that is, I think that the community has to be elected, as Mr. Porcelli is doing, and Mr. DiMasso. They are reaching out to you and bringing it to the community directly. And I think that interaction between local and state and federal is really important. So thank you, and I appreciate your openness to that. Thanks.
Congress, I didn't know, I'm just getting regular contact with me also. And we'll follow up with his office also. As soon as we get the report, we'll be following up with his office.
And I should also thank Senator Camilleri's office and Congressman Dingell's office too. Thank you. That's great.
I got an email from them today.
My name is Bill Heil. I live on East River Road. And I guess I want to start by saying thank you for your forthright answers as best you could give them. I have more respect for the challenges of change that are going on in a multiple of ways. Not everybody has a job and gets moved to Poland, or you have a change in standards for evaluation of what criteria you have or documents that are missing. I'm acknowledging that for a purpose. I'm concerned about Area 24A, 24B, but mainly 24A. It does not leave me with peace that aviation fuel is the only concern this island has ever had, sir. I saw some very high numbers for arsenic. I've also had concern about trichloroethane, which is the product that is used for cleaning up aircraft and all the parts in their service that goes on. I don't know a lot about it, but I have read some of these documents over the years, and trichloroethane is not something that sits on its duff like lead does. Its personality, if we call it a character, has a way of going down to the bottom of the bedrock, and then it sits there, and somewhere between 20 or 30 years later, it decides to move as a gas, and it can penetrate somebody's basement wall. It's odorless, it's colorless, it's tasteless, but it can do all kinds of things. It has the potential to change your DNA so that the baby you bring into the world has different DNA than you did when you were born, and it changes yours while it's at it. I don't think that's insignificant. What I'm asking is this. It's a rod, it's on under change, but we have a change of standards. Is this information that we're looking at the same that was valid back in 2017 or 7, excuse me? Or is it something reliable in the future? Cal has said something about standards changing in the future. We're going to sit here and make a decision about whether it's going to be mixed use or industrial, this land, whatever it is. I'm speaking rhetorically. And then in the future, suppose we want to change it to some other standard. What do we do then? Have we foregone any future help from the federal government to make it adjust to something new and appropriate to our circumstance? I'm looking at these varieties of questions, and any response I might have from you on that. I want to feel safe about 24 because I live only about 2,000 feet from it. And I've got pictures. I mean, this stuff can move underground. It can literally run under the river. You can go through the water. The plumes. I'm talking about the way the plumes, the plumes spread. But if anyone would like to field that question, I'd appreciate an answer.
Well, just refresh my memory. 24A is what? Which site?
24A, if you look at our island, the airport itself sort of looks like a triangle. And it is
I just need to know the name.
It's
Then
the
I.
lagoon near the seaplane base, to the north of the seaplane base.
Bill, do you know
It's
what?
on the right,
It's
the right bottom.
But it also moves.
Tell me the name of
easterly
the
from
site.
there,
Is that
right up
where
to the
the
shoreline.
waste, like the refrigerators and stuff
Lower
are?
right.
Oh, no,
Okay,
you see
well,
that
I
yellow
don't,
area
what's he
there?
talking about, TCE?
There's no
That-
TCE.
Yeah,
Ma'am, that yellow area you're looking at there along the right-hand side of the airport, the top part of it is the spot where I'm talking about. It runs along there.
this is where we had, there was
It's a dump
wash
of-
machines and
Yes,
dryers
yes,
and
there's other
things.
stuff in there, too.
Right,
You've
so
got it
that,
straight.
for us, under our regulations, well, first of all, we didn't find TCE there, as far as I know.
I know there was arsenic there, but I don't know
Well,
that the documents
arsenic
supporting
is
it.
like lead, it's everywhere.
heavy
and,
metal. This was very
const-
high. And I don't know that the documents are there. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but when I was getting this information, I was getting it from the EPA office here on the island. And the stuff was mysteriously moved, I think, to Northville. But I saw, I don't remember, is anybody here quickly able to go to Part 201 and come up with a number for whatever the intended use is? It's like a low single-digit number of some sort. And my memory serves me, and I might have a document, I didn't check that. It was like 200,000. I mean, it was a number that was off the charts.
This is an area that floods, right, from the Detroit River. So see, we always have difficulty in areas. First of all, we are mandated and required to look at what DOD did. What did the DOD do? And at the time, what I recall on that site, there were a lot of refrigerators, right? This is when they had refrigerators and wash machines. We went out, we sampled it, sampled the soil. I don't think there were exceedingly high numbers. And then I may be wrong about what happened when we sampled, but they had a recycler come in and they pulled up all of the metal and took it to a recycling facility. And when we went out, we didn't see, I don't believe that there was anything left, but that was
There's lots of stuff.
Yeah, there's still plenty.
not material things that what we would consider hazardous contamination.
There's a lot of debris left.
Right, there's debris, but debris is, I guess it just is more housekeeping, but I don't.
And
Can
the-
I ask just a quick question? How can you take sample, I've worked in that area and helped clean up that area. We took out, I don't know how many cubic yards of metal and garbage out of there. There's so much stuff buried in there, I don't even know how you can take samples. You cannot stick anything anywhere in that ground and take a soil sample because there's so much debris in there, and a lot of the stuff's right in the water. So, I'm with the Grosse Ile Nature and Land Conservancy. We did a lot of cleanup in there, and we brought this up as a concern. I believe you had scheduled a site visit back to look at it again. And we have some real concerns about it. We found drums, we found bottles, we found everything under the sun in that area. And a lot of it's sitting in the water. We couldn't dig a lot of it out because it's buried. And I don't know how you can take samples there. There's so much stuff in there, I don't see how you could even take a soil sample.
I need to add something about those.
So how do you deal with the landfills up in Auburn Hills and even in Westman, down the river, where they have a huge landfill, or South Chicago, where there's we're throwing refrigerators, computers, all kinds of stuff into these landfills. So that was a garbage dump, okay? So the contaminants that are coming from the landfills, even in West Detroit or Auburn Hills or down in Trenton, those are huge. And all of that stuff is leaching into our groundwater, right? So my final question is, and I think for my 7-year-old grandkids, I don't want to play them in a football field or a baseball field that has, contamination. But what we've done at Selfridge or Dam Neck or Cheatham Annex, where we have a large refrigeration facility for big ships to go over the Middle East, is we quarantine those areas off. And we say those areas, we don't want kids or humans in those areas. Like, I can't go to the waste management landfills and I can't just literally walk around. Although I could be okay, but they got a lot of trucks moving. Waste management has a lot of trucks moving through there.
Well,
So what we've been
let's
doing
stick
at
to Grosse Ile.
Dam Neck is we've been roping those areas off,
and we've been quarantining those areas. Now, Grosse Ile still has an aviation, and I'm a FEMA, I've been to FEMA school with Mount Weather. And
Yeah,
I've
but
been,
let's stick to the subject that Bill brought up.
that's
We don't care about Chicago and all these other places. Grosse Ile's our issue. Bill, finish your point.
Thank you.
he has no evidence.
He doesn't need it.
Pardon me, sir.
Finish your point.
I'd like to ask you a question. How do you know that? What do you know about me?
That's the point.
Then I'd take it and leave it there.
And you don't know nothing about me.
I understand what you're saying.
Let's stay on track.
What I'm concerned about is Area 20.
Yeah, let's go ahead and get back to the 24A.
I will go back to 24A.
And we can go back.
And I'll stay
All I can
focused
tell
on
you
that.
is the phase of, that 24A is in, is we did a remedial investigation, didn't find our contamination, and, per our standards. Now, we don't look at solid waste. Solid waste is a totally different issue. We're not talking about chemical contamination. So that might be where we're differing. What?
Also, I think we need to limit this to, this is a formerly utilized defense site program, and our funding is used to address DOD-related contamination.
And
Don't get me started on that one. I've read some pretty bad stuff about that.
And so what we were looking at, and we were talking about how do you get through all of the junk that's out there to even get samples, that concerns us because that's not our stuff. That wasn't DOD-related stuff there. So if there's a bunch of, things there, and I don't know the site, but if there is a lot of debris, a lot of junk there, that wasn't DOD's. And so we would definitely have to consider that, and we'd like you guys to understand that, not saying that DOD wouldn't address it, or that we would address it, but under FUDs, we can't use FUDs dollars to address non-DOD contamination.
And it's defined under CERCLA what is contamination and hazardous material.
Well, I need to apologize for interrupting you. Make note of that if you would, Cal.
But arsenic
But what I'd
is,
like to-
arsenic is listed as a
Yes.
hazardous material, so.
Yes, it is. And the point I'm getting at is with all of this in motion, what we discover later on might be that something that was closed needs to be reopened.
The liability never goes away.
I needed to hear that.
Yeah,
That was significant to me.
We also have sites, for example, in CERCLA, can you go back to that slide, please? So what happens in CERCLA, when you leave residual contamination in place, if you look up here, this ends after some type of remedial action. A lot of times in the feasibility study and proposed plan phase, we'll say, okay, in the deed, this property is going to be used for industrial park, right? And it has to remain as industrial park. So that's what we would call land use. That land use is deeded to stay that way. Some states have programs where they track those types of properties, et cetera. But what happens is every 5 years, the government has to go back out, or the property owner, whoever put the material there that left it, and we evaluate it. It's reassessed for new standards. It's looked at to make sure that the land use hasn't changed. And so all those things are looked at. Now that's where we have places that say are industrial, we closed them under industrial standards. That safeguard is in place. Sites that you're talking about that maybe there's a new discovery. We have a lot of sites now that we thought were closed that we're going back looking at new chemicals. We have emerging chemicals. So PFAS, for example, you hear and see all the Camp Lejeune commercials. So that's public awareness, and we have a lot of sites that we do our due diligence. We go back and track them, and we track emerging contaminants, new things that we didn't know about, microplastics in the ocean.
There's they're related to the DOD
that we did.
Well, two points. I appreciate what you said there, and it came to my mind about Salina, Kansas. And that's one where trichloroethane has moved from its original site. I think it's approaching 15 miles. I mean, this is something that has traveled, this is TCE again, a significant distance. And that came with time. It was moving faster than the environmental people thought it would, the Army Corps or anybody else. I've read about another situation that was very similar to that in the state of Washington. And what bothered me about it was that this community definitely had a problem. But the Air Force was denying liability because there was a possibility that not only were their aircraft with this thing going on contributing to it, but some other business whose nature I can't recall right now. And so in other words, this argument, and they were denying responsibility because someone else had contributed to it. And I'm talking about the Army Corps. And when that's happening, the people there have the same problem, whether it came from one or the other or both. And so I'm just trying to explain the reasoning why I'm asking about any Area 24A. You might have made some decisions about it that are about to finalize from back around 2007 or 2009, and now we have new things coming up. What if it's different? And you've told me that you review it every 5 years, and that gives me some peace of mind I didn't have before.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And we went back to that slide. They're in what they call the record of decision stage, and they submit draft versions of those things to us for our review. And you're exactly right. All this information was put together in 2007, and now we're getting around to this phase. We're saying, well, this is the decision we made on it. It's our responsibility as a state to look at the decision that's made relative to the information they have, and is it current? And that's actually been a problem with some of the things that have been submitted, because in particular the vapor intrusion issue has been in a lot of flux over the past 10 years. So when they submitted them, we were not able to agree with what had been submitted because you're exactly right, the criteria has changed. So we had to punt them back and say, you have to consider the new criteria. And so that is one of the reasons why some of this stuff has been delayed for the last couple of years, because you're exactly right, criteria has changed.
Thank you.
Because we have contractors that are under contract to write a report without looking at the new criteria. So that puts it all, there's a lot of things that are involved there, and that puts the onus back on us. But to answer your question about, we do look at who put the material there. And from a funding standpoint and what we're required to do legally, what we can do legally, it has to be DOD. And if there is any concern that it's not DOD, we go back and we investigate that. And there's a lot of steps. It gets high priority because, we have a lot of sites where there were airport or something where we use same materials that other people did. So there's a lot of times it's hard to tell who did it, but we have to be careful and make sure that we can, that it is DOD's responsibility.
Thank you for all your feedback. I'm Bill Morrow, Newton Drive, Grosse Ile. Back in 1957, 55 to 57, I was here every other weekend. And as a young kid, joining the Navy, and we did what we were told to do. We did a lot of stupid things. I saw a lot of stupid things happen. And we are suffering from that now. Everything was kind of free bird. Whatever you wanted to get rid of, you dumped it. We dumped the trichloroethylene. We dumped the paint chemicals in paint. The biggest thing that happened to me was almost every weekend we would go, and they had a Corsair at the end of the runway on the east side of the airport, and it was about in the middle. And right across actually from the dump site, the city dump site. And they used to set it on fire, and we had to go in there and put that fire out. And we did that maybe 2-3 times a day, every once in a while, but almost every other weekend. And found out now the contaminants not only affected my health and a lot of other people in fire prevention stuff. And Also, the chemicals that we use to put the fire out, the foam chemicals, saturated the ground. I mean, it was covered from, it'd make this building look like a swimming pool compared to what we spread all over. And again, I was here, saw what we did. We dumped stuff over in the city dump. We dumped stuff down at the end of the runway, which is what Bill's talking about now. And that's why you're seeing a lot of what you're encountering. And I think it continued on, certainly after I went active. And I'm sure it just continued on until all of a sudden the EPA started to monitor things and do what needed to be done. And that's exactly what we're living with now. And it's sad to think, and I'm probably the oldest dog in here, and I've been here and been through it and saw it. And this is what you're dealing with now. And it's sad to me to think how many people have been health affected by what we've done and what we continue to do. Like you're talking about the ocean, well, we're doing the same thing here. And I've talked to Debbie Dingle a couple of times about this, and she's very, very concerned about it, and as she should be. I've never met with your fella there, and I can't think of his name now. But anyway, that's all I wanted to say. And over in the soccer field, before there was the soccer field now, before it was a ski range, that's where our barracks were. We stayed in there. The barracks were built out of asbestos shingle and insulated with asbestos. To me, the biggest problem over there would be asbestos. And I have one last question for you, though, and that is you're talking about lead sinking to the bottom.
That's what the gentleman said.
Is lead
I didn't say that.
biodegradable?
Pardon me?
Is lead biodegradable? It's like gold then. It doesn't change once it's buried?
No, but what happens, lead gets incorporated into metallic particles and things, and you're...
So it won't vaporize?
No, I don't think so. I mean, maybe at really high Kelvin temperatures.
Can break down, dissolve, and get into small enough particles that can move with the rainwater and things, and go deeper into the soil that way.
You don't think it'll permeate through the surface?
Well, only if the surface soil comes up, it pulls it up.
Yeah, look, it does move down, right? It's rainwater carries things down if you think of it that way. But lead acts with, when they used to put it in gasoline, right? It's, but lead will react with organic matter and it chelates, and so it stays there in the environment for a long period of time.
Yeah.
And but the term that you aren't looking at is bioavailable. Even though it's there, it doesn't mean that you're going to take it in and absorb it, right? So it just depends on what form it's in, what ion, but it doesn't form the vapors.
I was just curious about that, and thank you for your input. Keep on what you're doing. I'm glad we get to the end of the road here, and if we continue to monitor, we'll be all safer. Of course, I don't know how much time I got left in the parade, but anyway, thank you for that.
Well, thank
Sir,
you.
Can you spell your last name?
Morreau.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Joe.
Go ahead.
Derek Thiel, Thiel is the last name, Chatham Road in Grosse Ile. Could you just really briefly go over the process that you went through to identify the AOCs? And then also if there are any potential issues that are identified that would warrant an additional classification of a different area within the airport here as a new AOC. What I had heard earlier is the liability never goes away. I'm assuming if it was found to be a DOD responsibility or DOD contamination that occurred at a potential new AOC, then you would go through that process, the same process you've gone through with the other AOCs. So I guess two questions there. One, clarification, and one, just a quick recap of how you identified the AOCs.
Well, years ago, they had the United States Army, who are they called? Not CHIPM, but there's an agency within the Army. I'm sorry, I can't think of the name. But one of the things that they do, so there's a historical aspect that looks at all the use. They take the footprints of the former facility, look at where it's at, look at where there's any potential source. We're real good at identifying things that are going to leak. They may look for old leak reports from a historical perspective. So they look at all of those things. They go out and they sample. There's a hazardous ranking system. It gets a score. And depending upon the site, some places don't call them areas of concern. They're called solid waste management units or operational areas. So they have different names, but they're basically areas that you can define that generally are limited to certain types of contamination, right? And then we go from there. When we first investigate the sites, we generally look for multiple suites of chemicals. Like at Grosse Ile, we looked for polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and they did some studies. That was done on a facility-wide basis. Then we go in and we look at individual areas. So that's how we find that. If there is any time, at any place, if there's new areas that are identified, we would have to investigate them, start to again look for if it's DOD, and we'd go from there. So.
Yeah, 'cause I think I recall I want to say it was 2010, we did find a undocumented UST. I think it might have been in and around AOC 17, and I think that was the first phone call was we made to you folks about coming to take a look at it to see if it was a DOD UST. So I think that there's always the possibility, I would assume there's always the possibility that would come up, but obviously you would be, all would be involved if something like that did arise.
Sure.
Okay.
And if it was a UST, we probably wouldn't call that a AOC off the bat, but we'd clean it up and close it out. You know, that's in 1993 to 96, we pulled all of the underground storage tanks, and then they did, you know, a lot of sampling below them, following Eagle guidance, MDQ at that time. But so they sample around it, above it, the sidewalls where the tank was, and they also look at and analyze what's left in the tank. So they would do all that for
the
the.
document that's available in the administrative record, asking for kind of what you were talking about, is going to be your preliminary assessment. That's where we go out and look at the site and kind of just see what was done at the site, what DOD activities occurred, and that's where we develop what AOCs we probably need to look at. And then we move into the site investigation. That's where we get into more of the sampling, determine whether or not there's actual contamination there. But the preliminary assessment, or what we'll say the PA, that's what's going to give you kind of that background of where we decided where we were going to look at initially. And so if a new site came up, not a UST, because like she said, we'll probably just go out and remove it. But if we come up with a new area, say, oh, I think there might have been a landfill here, we would probably start with like a PA level document for that area and move forward from there. So we look at the DOD activities and the PA, and then if we did find evidence to support that it needed further investigation, then we would move into that site inspection and then go further down into the road as we needed to, and that's the process.
Yeah, because once we don't own the property anymore, we have no idea what people did there or what happened. And so that's why from a funding standpoint, we need to make sure that it is DOD. And
right.
And we do look at that, the future or the post-DOD activities that occurred in that phase. So if we find something that somebody else was out there and did something that contaminated the site, if it's something that, you know, maybe we did something and there's TCE there, but then there's a post-DOD user out there that did something that could have contributed to the TCE contamination, then that becomes a potentially responsible party site, and we have to work through negotiations.
share cost and things.
Now, if it's something that's totally separate, like we did something that was TCE and then we have done something different, as long as they're not commingled, we can go ahead and address it. But if it's commingled, then we have to go through that potentially responsible party process to kind of negotiate, because like she said, we're limited to only spending the government's funds on government contamination.
It goes through the Department of Justice too then, right? Because so it's out of our hands at that time. Someone else decides.
To find a responsible party. Before Bill, go real quick, I want to thank you all for coming, spending your time with us this evening, and making yourself available to the public and making the presentation to the public about this. It is very valuable, and I think it's great that you all came, so thank you for that.
I'd like to go back to that commingling just briefly. I'd like to go back to that commingling. That's very significant, and I think here on Grosse Ile, it is probably a place where you're more likely to have it than in many other locations, because a lot of this stuff is carried by water. Died from cancer, and they thought it was caused by these metal chips. This stuff moves. We have opportunity here for a lot of that commingling, but the point that you made that I think is significant is that you have procedures right down to the forms that ask the questions to decide whether it's sole responsibility or dual responsibility, whether it's collectible or not, how to appeal it through the Department of Justice. I needed to hear that. So I had that concern, and I wanted to emphasize that this place is going to have it. It's an issue, but at least we have a system in place. If we gather the information, there's a system for making decisions. So then I'm thankful for that.
You're exactly right. One of the first things we look for is is there contamination there that could potentially contaminate the groundwater? So one of the first things we look for. And then we also look at, is the contamination there going to potentially enter airspaces and get into the buildings? Those are the two things we look at right off the bat.
You're looking for the devil in the detail.
Very exactly. Very exactly.
My name is Bob Z. I live over on Blauvelt. First of all, I too would like to thank you for coming this evening. I mean, this is the gamut that we have here. We have representatives from local government. We have representatives from the state. We also have members of our township board, including our supervisor here. So with relation to what this young lady was saying, yes, this is very important to us. And this means a lot. And we didn't fill the room, but I can assure you there are many people watching this on TV right now. When would we anticipate maybe the next meeting? You've got a report coming back in February, so on and so forth. And this project is going to be ongoing, probably after I'm gone. Boy, this thing understands. We still have a lot of issues here, correct?
Our next meeting should be, we have it in the fall. That's been our intention. It was
Okay.
delayed a little bit because of change in personnel and because of the potential we didn't want to have the meeting scheduled and we thought we may be furloughed, so that was why it got pushed. We had it scheduled for September, then it got moved to October, then it got moved to November, so.
Okay, well, this is excellent, and we can hope to have another one of these meetings with an update?
Yeah,
Because Grosse Ile, we're talking 550 acres here, so we have I can understand what you're saying. Yes, we may have a little different situation than other communities, and thank you for the additional attention.
Yeah, I think that we are committed at this point to continue annual meetings and through our community relations plan. And then anytime we have a proposed plan, that's where we start to get the public's input. So any of these AOCs that move to that point in the process, there'll be a separate proposed plan meeting for that. So there'll be some opportunities for that.
Is there any way that we can provide you with more input?
Yes, there's a slide for public comments to Mr. Maddox, right?
But if you just want to comment on anything, certainly you can provide us comments. We eat written, send them in the mail, anything that you want to do, comment on that, I mean, relative to
Right.
the project.
I have the information.
Not my clothes or something, but.
Well, you
you
did a great job. All you folks did. The knowledge that you brought with you is impressive. I'd like to go talk now on the side a little bit. Bill Morrow does have a great understanding because he was here and he witnessed a lot of what was going on. We know for a fact that there was, just on the other side of Groh Road here, there were many areas of possible contaminants. In fact, I think there was a chemical plant, so on and so forth. Valio, yeah. And a lot of those materials seeped down when it was all shut down. One of the corrective actions is to put material over the top, 6 feet, 8 foot, whatever of dirt. I understand was one of the corrective actions to ensure that we wouldn't experience any of those pollutants. I believe this area right here also falls in your jurisdiction where we put up a new project called Pirates Cove. You probably saw it when you pulled in. During that time, a lot of us witnessed digging down 12, 15 feet, bringing it up to the surface, seeing it excavated and pushed around. And that would be of great concern based on the history that I just gave of that area across the road. Can anybody comment, do we have studies showing samples of the material that was brought up over there? That it's safe? Is there such a report? Does that work with Eagle? Do you work with Eagle on that?
That would be with Eagle, come out of your district office down here.
Okay. Ben said one of these gentlemen is representative of Eagle?
I am.
Oh, you are? Okay. Could you maybe expand on that?
I'm not familiar with that project. I work out of Lansing.
What's it called, Valio?
Well, no, the old
company?
plant was across the street when I put the prelude down for the history of what took place there. The new project that they just put in, we put in over here, is called Pirates Cove. You'll see all these storage areas. This
So
was
when
not,
they-
this was not here last time you were here.
But before they did that, they would have had some engineering, some soil surveys, taken some soil samples.
They?
Whoever owns the property and did the work, I would think,
Yeah, I've been,
So that's outside of the Corps'
yeah, that would
jurisdiction,
be
so
the
that's
core.
why
That'd be
we're
something
gonna
that
defer
you
to
can work
Bill.
with me, and then I can go to the district and find out.
yeah.
Okay.
about it.
So the Army Corps of Engineer has no responsibility for what may have taken place or what was dug up over there?
Well, we don't know.
That we're aware of.
I don't, yeah.
It sounds like your concern was the operations that occurred more after DOD was there, and so that's something we don't have any control over, any jurisdiction over. But as the regulator, Eagle should be able to help you out with letting you know kind of.
Okay.
the process.
We're not passing the buck.
No, no,
It
I
just-
understand.
yeah,
If it's not in your bailiwick, that's
That's what I
fine.
just
So
asked Kim. She's
my question is
experienced too.
directed towards Eagle.
We don't know that company or anything about it, but, and I've been working on this project for,
And it sounds like it wasn't
years,
an
too.
area that was identified as possible DOD contamination originally, so I don't know that much of the information we have would be applicable.
Well,
really
is,
to-
I don't have a map, but this right across the street
well.
is one
it
of the
within
areas,
the-
I believe.
I mean, can you show us on
Sure.
the barracks area? Didn't we dig that up?
Right across
I
Groh
thought-
Road here. Everything right across Groh Road. We're talking 10 feet the other side of the road. I couldn't reach that high. My torn muscle, I couldn't go that high.
Yeah, I think it's in my display.
But that also fell under the jurisdiction of the Army Corps of Engineers.
It was part of the fud's property,
Mhm.
but when we did that preliminary assessment that we were talking about before, I'm not sure that we identified that as an area of concern for an issue for contamination related to our activities. Now, that's not to say there isn't anything there.
Right.
If we find something that says that there were some DOD activities there that could have contributed to contamination, we would start all back over and start that preliminary assessment part and start to go through that whole process.
So that's the kind of information you need to get to us.
Yeah.
So we can't do anything at this point.
It sounds like you're asking about the recent industrial activities there is why I was trying to.
It doesn't matter how deep it is, if we put it there, it's, it's something we would have to
Right.
address.
But
So,
there was activity, and you had made a statement earlier that what we do with the property after you're gone, you don't know. And this was a project that was taken on over here, but knowing that there was a lot of pollutants that went in the ground just the other side of this road and was covered up purposely with materials. And then you come drive by here and you see a project and they're digging down 12, 15 feet and then just pushing it around with bulldozers, you can understand the concern.
Sure.
Yeah, is your point of contact, did you sign in on the?
I certainly did.
Do you have an email or a phone number?
I certainly did.
Great. I'll follow up with that.
It's over there.
Okay.
make sure you sign in.
Can you just state your name one more time?
My name is Bob Zelasco, live on Blauvelt. Okay, is there anyone else? One more?
Name is Greg Karmazin. It's 21228 East River Road, Grosse Ile. I apologize for getting to the meeting late, so I don't know if you covered some of this in the beginning or not, but is there any type of summary document that shows an inventory of the areas of exceedance or where you've found contamination over the years, and then the description of the cleanup? Or are these on a series of documents that would go over, say, 20-year period or more, that the cleanup activities are going on? Because I know that this has been going on for quite a long time, but if someone wanted to actually look at the areas where you did find the contamination and then what was done to that site, is there any kind of summary document that shows the findings of where you had the worst, the problems, and then what was done to them?
No, there's not
It's all in one document.
right.
Right, it's gonna be in those series of documents on that table that we sent out. And then there's different, even through that process, you saw there was a preliminary assessment, a site inspection, a remedial investigation, a proposed plan, feasibility study, record of decision. So so that's all the documents you're gonna see for each of these areas. And unfortunately, because of the way the program's set up, so that we can move things along a little quicker, we do try to separate those out into different areas of concern and address them in like segments. So there's not just one preliminary assessment, or there's probably one preliminary assessment, but for like, there's not one site inspection or one remedial investigation that's gonna pull all those sites together. You're gonna have to, there are several documents in each phase even,
Well,
so.
yeah, and there's also different programs. So if you notice some of those that were underground storage tanks that we pulled, we investigated those. We never got those closed out through the process. So we brought them now, and they were recently closed. So you have something that, you know, has happened 25 years ago that we just now closed. It wasn't that we didn't do anything. It just wasn't closed through out of our books, right? So there's a, I think last meeting, or maybe the last time I was here, we put a table together that had kind of the status on it and things. So I don't know, see if I can resurrect that. Yes,
Okay.
The remedial investigation report that was done, when, was it 2007?
I think maybe a little earlier than that, but yeah, that time frame.
That might be the most comprehensive document that you could start with to kind of look at what all the different sites are, and then start to break out the different further investigations.
Yeah.
AOC after that.
But they made recommendations that were based on things at that time with, they didn't always have the right information. Like, there was one of the AOCs, for example, moved around 3 places. And they weren't really sure, so they went out and sampled the 3 places, and they didn't find anything. But there's still some uncertainty with that, and so we had to investigate it more. And
Yeah, okay, well, I guess what you're saying is that if a member of the public wanted to really drill down into this, they would have to go through all those documents to understand where you found the contamination, and then in each report on that particular site, look at what was done on that site to understand over a long period of time how this entire project has been
right,
cleaned up.
and some of those sites that, like the underground storage tanks, when those are pulled, if they don't find anything with those, they don't really get any of these reports at all. So it's not that it doesn't exist, but they did what they were required to do. I think Bill, right, mentioned about checking off forms and having the right forms. And sometimes it's filling out the checklist. They didn't find anything, nothing in the samples. But you wouldn't find a report on it, is my point. So it is difficult, but,
Yeah, I
but we're
guess
here
I'm
to
most
help.
concerned, I think most people are concerned in the areas where you did find serious contamination that warranted cleanup, and then to be able to track the progress over a long period of time. I think it's confusing for the public, difficult for the public to, figure out what has happened here if you can't go to some type of document as a reference to say, well, here's the master list of all the sites that we've found serious contamination on, and here's the result of what we've done. Just a summary that might reference the report where you might have more detail, but that if it's possible to make a document like that, in your program, I think it would be helpful as an index to referencing documents that you're talking about were developed over perhaps a 25-year period of time. But I do have one specific question about the
Eyesight, though.
about the landfill, the township landfill. There were quite a bit of contamination that was dumped in there by the Navy during its operation, and I have a 2006 report here that I think it's described as a preliminary environmental investigation of the former township landfill, dated in January 5th, 2006. So undoubtedly there have been additional reports that have come out, but there's one reference in here in the recommendations. And on one of the recommendations, it says the groundwater quality data should be confirmed by additional round of sampling with existing observation wells and compared to Part 201 criteria. Additional hydrological investigation should be conducted to determine whether groundwater contamination parameters at concentrations above Part 201 GSI criteria and discharging to the adjacent surface water, so forth. So I serve on the EPA McClough Steel Community Advisory Group, and I know that there's a lot of concern in the McClough Steel site. Of course, it's across the river in Trenton and Riverview about groundwater contamination. And in fact, one of our last meetings, this was a big issue about, they're just now finding evidence of groundwater contamination and about contamination that has been there probably for, decades. And I just wondered, in particular to the landfill, if there's been additional sampling of the groundwater and additional review of that particular site.
Well,
Sounds like what you're saying is that landfill's off-site, and so that's not part of the FUDS project that we're working on now.
well, who wrote the PA?
So,
That's the first thing, right? You
Yeah,
said it was
this was written by
am I right though that the landfill-
NTH Consultants. It was.
Was it
It was-
federally funded?
Well, it was for the landfill,
Uh,
for the PRP. Like he's saying that it was.
I'm
I
not
just wanna know
sure
who
about
wrote the
that,
report
but
and who paid for it.
it was addressed to the township manager in 2006. But I think that the issue was that this landfill was used by the Navy, and that contamination came to the site from the Navy. And over the years, there's been a lot of anecdotal discussion in the community about this landfill and the possibility of, contamination in that landfill site affecting the surrounding area. I mean, it's all anecdotal, it's all speculative, but I just think that I would like to know the history of this site and the landfill and what kind of additional investigation's been done on it when there was a recommendation, at least by one environmental consultant. I don't know who funded this project or this study, but there was a recommendation to do some additional groundwater investigations. So I'm just raising it as a concern.
I don't think it's part of our FUDS project. It's not saying that DOD or Navy wouldn't address it. And certainly I think they probably would, but not under the FUDS program. So it's something that's outside of our area, but I don't know if you as a regulator would have any input.
Well,
on
we
that.
can look into it to see where it's at, if we could get a copy of the report and that kind of information. I mean, we have sites that are landfills that aren't necessarily within the boundaries, but
Sounds like the township may have paid for it.
I think so.
I believe they did. It was before my time, but I remember them talking about, over the years hearing about it. And I don't think it was I don't believe it was the only one. I think we had, we looked at it even after that was done, but never, I don't believe they ever did anything other than just get a report.
And I would think the township would be working with the Eagle District staff on that.
Yeah, and this was some years ago, maybe 2012.
Well, we do sample the groundwater on our sites here within the boundaries on all of the AOCs where we have groundwater and concern. But I don't know anything about the site. I'm sorry, I can't address that. So it's past our time. You had something? I know you.
Well, I know there was offers for feedback for how the public can interact with us more. First, again, I did want to thank you all for coming here. Most of my interaction was through the online ones. At least from my perspective, part of why the public participation has gone the way it has, I think folks did sign up for that resident advisory board. I know there was a process where you all determined that it wasn't a good idea. But I think one of the criteria was that you all are almost done with a lot of the sites here, so that's why it didn't make sense to necessarily start up a resident advisory board. But for me, at least, what's been confusing, well, I mean, everything is confusing, all the acronyms, everything. I understand the process relatively well, but also just knowing the information you've given out has been conflicting on some things. And then going back to area of concern 25. That's what's been tough. I know last meeting a lot of people didn't show up because the assumption was more testing was going to be done, so there wasn't any worries. And then at that meeting, that's when you all said, "Oh, we've looked at it again and we decided not to test." So that's where it's been really confusing, at least for me on the outside, and why you're seeing varying levels of participation. And then just very specifically to your point, Mr. Harbin, I know you said that a residential standard will be over 30 years and maybe a soccer field will be less. I think for me the concern is they're just very young kids that play there. It's like 2-3 years old, so it's not like regular kids just run around. These are kids that they don't chase after the soccer ball. They'll just sit down, play with the bugs that they're eating stuff. So it's just a high risk population that we're concerned, and that's the standard we want to be looking at for our, yeah. Okay, excellent. Yeah.
Exactly right.
Yeah, that was it.
Oh, no, I was going to give it to you. That was-
Okay, well, thank you. I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Make sure that you do sign in for any information and any questions, any additional information, comments, please submit those. And we'll address them.